Well, first of
Go
all,
ahead.
great to be with you guys on the Two Witnesses. My name's Dave Bryan. I pastor the Church of Glad Tidings in Northern California. My wife Cheryl and I have been here just about 38 years now, so it's been a while. We also oversee what we call the Embassy of Heaven, that includes everything. It's a food sovereignty program, so we have cattle and goats and crop box and putting in greenhouses and so we do a ton of stuff here. But anyway, part of it is the Church of Glad Tidings and yeah, we had an experience in 1997 that we were following our motto. Our motto here is find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. And we adopted that 38 years ago, and it's guided us all this time. And so we've reached out and taken in a lot of homeless people, gang bangers, lots of gang bangers off the street, single
Wow.
moms, orphans. That's just what we do. And
What part of
so back in 1997, we took a lady in just out of compassion. We could tell that she had a tough life. I thought she was just another homeless person, but God spoke to my wife Cheryl to take her in, and so we did. We had three boys at the time, from the age of 10 to 13. We had three sons, and so we took her in, and all hell broke loose. I didn't know diddly squat about what now they call deliverance or exorcism, but we had helped a lot of homeless people, and my wife was the granddaughter of a famous healing evangelist named A. Allen. And so Grandpa Allen, he cast demons out of a lot of people, and wasn't really well received in the what I call the Great American Religious Enterprise because of it. But uh, he saw lots of healings and lots of deliverances. So my wife grew up with that. I didn't. I just grew up in a church setting where we believed all that was historically true, but no one ever saw any of it. And
right?
so that was what I call now cerebral Christianity. There's all kinds of things that you have up here, but they're not real in your day to day life. And so that was me. I believed in God, and I had my questions about the church. Because of multiple dysfunctions that I saw in it. Still do, by the way. But I loved God, and I just was anxious to close the gap between what we said we believed and where we lived. And and God knew that was true of both my wife and I, and so He just arranged a situation to just really get up in our grill with a do or die opportunity, where we had to either learn how to cast out demons or just admit that we didn't do that kind of stuff anymore. So anyway, that's my story. It was a watershed moment of our lives, and I thank God for it. It was very intense. It was very difficult for me, but this gal we brought in off the street, she said her name was Ramona Jarnigan, and we didn't know. We just thought it was a homeless lady. But anyway, the long and short of it is that first night, at 2 o'clock, when the clock struck two, all hell broke loose. And so we just guessed our way along. It was unbelievable. It was sheer desperation and the mercies of God. We didn't know how to cast out a demon, but both Cheryl and I are the way we're wired is we're not going to back down. If we die trying, we'll die trying, but we're not going to just say we can't do this. And so we just begin to read the Bible and ask God for mercy and experiment around. And, we tried all kinds of stuff and everything from, I rebuke you to put the lime in the coconut and stir it all about. We didn't know what we were doing. We were just like, what the heck? And so, anyway, that out of that story came an international deliverance ministry. And I've been all over the world casting out demons. We do at the church twice a year a week long teaching on spiritual warfare and deliverance that we call the Isaiah 61 Summit. It's a week of free teaching. We pray for everybody that comes. And so we've been doing it for a long time, but it all started years ago out of a desperation to meet urgent needs and to, again, our motto is find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. So we've never backed away from a broken person, whether they're, a sex fiend or a gang banger or a cocaine addict or, a runaway teen. We just, we have another motto, meet them where they are and love the hell out of them. So anyway, we've been doing that for years, and it stood us in good stead. But that is really what launched us from just a relatively small church in the rice fields in Northern California to really national acclaim as exorcists, because there just aren't many of them. And sadly, for many years, it was the Catholic Church that had more exorcists, and the Christian Church, the Protestant Church that claims to have the power of the Holy Spirit. You could look through 100,000 churches and not find a church that would cast a demon out of somebody. So anyway, that's kind of how we got started. It's an amazing story. I wrote a book about it that is called The Serpent and the Savior. Looks like this. You can get it
Wow.
online. And it's the story of us taking in this gal who, again, I told you we didn't know who she was. She wound up being Ray Lavey, one of the birth daughters of Anton Lavey, who was the Black Pope, the head of the Church of Satan internationally, and the author of the Satanic Bible. So we had no idea what we were getting into. But
This was
anyway,
God's work. This was God's work at play right here.
it was God's work at play. We call him Jehovah Sneaky because, uh, we don't know what's going on, but he always does. And
But
he
now in
just,
hindsight, you see it. You see it in hindsight,
yeah,
and it's like, wow.
exactly, exactly.
But go ahead.
And
Yeah,
so,
definitely finish it.
well, that was 1997. I mean, the gal that introduced herself to us as Ramona Jarnigan, we found out later her birth name was Ray Lavey. She was conceived in a satanic ritual and dedicated to be a bride of Satan. So she'd been through years, a lifetime of satanic ritual abuse, the worst kind of things you can imagine. In fact, they're unimaginable unless you have a demented mind. But she survived all that, which most people don't. Most children that go through extended satanic ritual abuse die somewhere in the process or find a way to off themselves. But she lived through a lifetime of it. And then she went through 6 of the 7 rituals of defilement that were uh, that were written out uh, by Aleister Crowley. He said that he had them dictated to him by Lucifer. Uh, it was a Egyptian name for Lucifer, but in any event, he said that Lucifer showed him how to defile a human body to the point that it qualified to be the bride of Satan,
Wow.
completely defiled. The whole idea was beyond redemption and so perverse and so defiled that she qualified, if we can say it that way, to be the bride of Satan. And so, anyway, that's what Ray had been through. It's a long story. I'll tell you as much as you want to about it, but it sure took us by storm. And again, well, we weren't prepared for that. We were just pastoring the church and following a motto that we got from Scripture. It says Jesus went about doing good and helping all who were oppressed of the devil, for God was with them. And we didn't know how to help those who were oppressed of the devil. So we just contented ourselves with going about doing good. So we built the church from 70 to over 1,500 by just helping orphans and widows and runaway teens and doing juvenile hall outreaches, reaching out to the county jails, and just doing all the stuff that traditionally you would think of as Christian enterprise, reaching out to broken people. We did that for years, and then God just launched this on us and brought this lady into first our church. I led her to the Lord, not knowing who she was, and recognizing that she was very broken. I gave her my card and said, if you ever need anything, give me a holler. And the next day she called and she was whispering. She said, come help me. And I said, well, who are you and why are you whispering? She said, I'm the lady you gave the card to, and I'm whispering because I'm hiding in the bushes in front of the courthouse because witches are trying to kill me. And really, this goes back to 1997. I was not the man I am now in terms of my worldview or anything. So the fact that it was a sunny California Monday and she said that witches were trying to kill her, that was hard for me to wrap my brain around. So I thought she was just a homeless person. And I've learned that homeless people, when they get hungry enough, they can be pretty creative in the stories that they tell you. Which, by the way, from our point of view, is neither here nor there. We always help them, regardless of the tall tale that they use to try to justify compassion. Which compassion doesn't need to be justified. You do it because
Right.
it's right, and you do it to whoever needs your mercy and compassion. So anyway, we were used to helping homeless people, and so when she said witches were trying to kill her, my first response was, "Well, you said you're at the courthouse. Why don't you just walk inside? The courthouse is crawling with police." She said, "Oh, I can't do that." And I said, "Why?" She said, "Can we talk about this later? My life's in danger." So I decided to go down there and find out what was going on. And sure enough, she was hiding in the bushes. She came running out and jumped in the car and hid. She laid down in the back seat and said, "Drive before they see that I'm in your car, or they'll come after us." And so anyway, neither Cheryl or I, Cheryl was with me at the time, we wasn't sure what's going on, but we took her to the church and prayed for her and found out that she was homeless. And from her account, witches were after her, which didn't really make sense to me. But nonetheless, we said, well, why don't you come home and stay with us? We had opened our house to a lot of people at that point because of our ministry motto: find a need and meet it, find a hurt and heal it. We'd find somebody on the street and would have them come stay in our house until either they gave their life to Christ and put the wheels back on their wagon, or sometimes they just got tired of being there and went back, to pursue whatever, a life in drugs or whatever it was they came out of. But that was just part of our life, is helping people. So we took this woman in, and and quite oblivious to the whole world of the occult, we were just trying to be nice Christian people. So that first night that she was there at 2 o'clock, right on the minute mark of 2 o'clock, all hell broke loose, and I heard a blood curdling scream, and she came rolling down the stairs from upstairs. We lived in a big Victorian house. Came rolling right up against our bedroom door, the dark of the night, screaming, and we could hear her screaming, "Leave me alone, Knack. I'm not yours anymore." And so anyway, I got my Levi's pulled on, turned on the light, and neither Cheryl or I had any idea what to do next. But she was batting at something and screaming, and so we just started just praying. Oh God, help! And she kept saying, "Leave me alone, Knack." So we started on that one. Leave her alone, Knack. Not having any idea who Knack was, it just seemed like a logical request to be made at the time. And anyway, through the intensity of the whole thing, suddenly it was gone. The spirit that she was fighting with, we could see her, batting at it and swinging at it, but we couldn't see the spirit. But anyway, suddenly it was peaceful, and she said, "Oh, thank you very much." And I said, "Well, you're welcome. I think we should talk about what just happened." She said, "Oh, I'm tired. Can we talk about it tomorrow?" And I said, "Actually, no. We need to talk about it right now. Who is Knack, and how do you know him by name? And could you see him?" I had all kinds of questions. She said, "Of course I could see him. Couldn't you?" And we said, "No." She said, "Oh, you're blind to the spirit world, aren't you?" Well,
Oh,
I've
wow.
been pastor for years, and
Yeah.
I felt like, hey, lady, try to be a little more polite here. Don't be
No, but
dogging
she's
on me.
right.
I just helped save you from something. But she was
She's right.
absolutely right. And
She was.
I said, well,
Wow.
if you're asking if I can see spirits, no. She said, yeah, that's what we call blind.
Yeah.
And so, I started in my mind taking notes like who's we in that statement. That's who we call blind. And I said, who's
Wow.
Knack? She said, he's a murder spirit. And I said, okay, so how do you know a murder spirit on a first name basis? And she said, what do you mean first name? That's his whole name, Knack. I said, my point is, how do you know his name? And she said, oh, I used to dabble in witchcraft. And I made a note, like, not likely that was dabbling. And so, anyway, that was the first night. We asked her some questions. She really didn't want to divulge anything. And we were glad to have survived the experience, frankly. So
Yeah.
we all went to bed for the night. And the next day, I asked her some questions, and she wasn't forthcoming at all. She said,
I
I've had
bet.
some, yeah. She said, I've had some bad experiences, and I was involved in a coven, and that's why the witches were trying to kill me. I didn't want to be involved anymore. And but she always used the term dabbling, and I thought, nah, I've met dabblers, and they don't know murder spirits on a first name basis. But anyway, I was making my notes, and so that second night, 2 a.m. exactly.
2
All
a.m.
hell broke
again?
loose. Yep, 2 a.m. And another scream in the night, and we were rebuking another spirit, and it happened several more nights, and each time we got a little more information. And after it happened 3 or 4 nights in a row at exactly two, I began to set my alarm clock for 1:55 because I
Wow.
knew 2 o'clock it was on, and that gave me a chance to get up, put my Levi on,
Got your
lock my
coffee
nose.
going?
Exactly. But
Wow.
anyway, I said, Ramona, why 2 o'clock? And she said, what do you mean? I said, I mean, you know, every night it's 2 o'clock. It's not a quarter till two. It's not a quarter after. It's 2 o'clock. And she said, well, the witching hour, duh. Well, I grew up on a ranch in Idaho. I didn't know diddly squat. I'd never even heard the term the witching hour. I've heard it a lot since then, but at the time, I said, explain the witching hour. And she said, you don't even know what the witching hour is? And I said, no, I'm not a witch. She said, well, I know, but I thought everybody knew what the witching hour was. And I said, well, let's assume that I don't know. Why don't you explain it? She said, well, you know, in witchcraft and Satanism and all the occult sciences, you you do all kinds of conjurings and sacrifices uh, from midnight until 2. And at 2 o'clock, it's time for the demons to make good on the payments you've made to them. And of course, I was that makes sense perfectly now, but at the time, I said, "Whoa, wait a minute. How do you pay demons?" She said, "In blood. That's the currency of the spirit world." And so it could be the blood of a cat or the blood of a bat or a frog, or if you really need something big done, the blood of a human being. And the highest price is the blood of an innocent man child. Well, all that was news to me. It's like, what? I didn't even know that a system of devil worship actually existed. I just kind of thought that was a Hollywood construct. And you know, in my mind, who would want to serve the devil, and what good would that do? And again, you know, I was from Emmett, Idaho. The whole town had 3,000 people. They were all good old boys, right? So it was all news to me. But as she talked, I thought, this lady, she's desperate, but she's not being honest with you. You don't gain that kind of information from dabbling. And so I was just kind of taking notes on it. And so every night something like that would happen. And we wound up going to the internet, and, you know, it'd be some particular spirit like the Piazza spirit. And I'd go Google Piazza and find out that it was the power spirit of the Illini Indian nation, and considered to be the strongest spirit uh, for the North American Indians. That's why it occupies the top of the totem pole. And so, you know, it's called the Piazza bird for the Illini Indians, and called the Thunderbird for most North American Indian tribes. And uh, it has different names in different places. The Firebird, the Phoenix, it's all the same spirit, but a very powerful spirit.
Right.
And so I had actually, I graduated from a Bible college, and some of my friends had asked me to come do a Bible camp for them. And it was actually a family camp. And I was trying to get out of it because we had this lady in our home, and just bizarre things were happening every night. But they wouldn't let me out of it. So I said, well, I'll come do it if you'll give me 2 cabins on the outskirts of the camp, and understand that we have a really troubled woman that we're bringing with us, and we can't really leave her home. So if you want me to come do the camp, I need 2 different cabins, and I won't be interfacing during the meal times or anything. Um, but if you really want me to come, that's what it has to be. So we went to that camp, and it was bizarre. All kinds of supernatural things happened there that were inexplicable. But the real breakthrough came on the way to that camp, because we had fought this powerful demon the night before we left to drive to the camp. Camp was in Oregon, and we live in Northern California. So um, we had fought with this Piazza spirit, and found out it was a very powerful Indian spirit. We weren't able to cast it out. And so several times on our way to this Oregon camp, we had to pull the van over, because Ramona, as we called her then, she would manifest. We still didn't know that she was Ray Lavey, and we hadn't yet given her the name she goes by now. So we just knew that it was a very troubled woman from off the streets. And so we were driving to this camp, and she would manifest, and we had our family with us, and uh, Cheryl's sister and brother-in-law, and we were all just trying to figure out how to contain this woman, and we were learning about casting out demons, but a very difficult time. And So we had just been along the road, uh, along Highway 99 South, and we were having some very intense uh, deliverance sessions, and they were Indian spirits, and so everybody was exhausted, including me. But we had to get to the camp, so we loaded up, and I said, "Hey, we're just going into Oregon. Excuse me, just going into Nevada here, and we're going to be late. I'm the keynote speaker. The people are already a bit frustrated because of the special conditions. I wanted two cabins on the outskirts of the camp, and yada yada yada." So I said, I really am going to go as fast as this little Chevy van will go. See if we can make it on time, or at least be there in time for me to speak. And so when we got into Nevada, I just put the pedal to the metal and went for it. Everybody was asleep in the van. We were going over 100 miles an hour through Nevada. And I saw a sign that said, Winnemucca Indian Nation, 10 miles. And those 10 miles went by pretty fast at 110 miles an hour. And but when I saw the sign, I just had a feeling in my heart that I know was the Holy Spirit. It's just kind of a heads up, buddy. We all, feel that from time to time, and we don't know exactly what's going on. We just know that the Holy Spirit gave us a heads up, so to watch out. So that had happened, and I was thinking, I wonder if this has anything to do with the Indian spirits that are in her, and we're coming onto an Indian reservation. But anyway, when we passed the sign that said "Welcome to the Winnemucca Indian Nation," and again we were going over 100 miles an hour. And when we passed that sign, all the doors in the van opened up. Back doors, the big sliding side door, our doors, my door, and of course, this woman was fast asleep in the passenger chair right beside me, but everybody's seat belts came off simultaneously, the doors came open simultaneously, and an unseen force tried to throw her out on the highway. And fortunately,
Whoa.
she's a lady.
Wow.
I reached over and grabbed her arm and was trying to keep her from going out the door. Her feet were hanging out um,
Wow.
nearly um, onto the pavement. But anyway, I was pulling on her like this, trying to get the van stopped. Of course, everybody woke up terrified, and it was quite a deal. But as soon as I got it stopped and pulled her in, she reached under my seat, under the captain's chair, and came out with my Browning high-powered 9mm, which was locked and loaded and ready to go. And so now I'm wrestling that from her and trying to keep her from shooting me with it. Finally got that out of her hand, and by that time, the other adults in the car had come, got organized to the point of trying to help me. Anyway, we subdued her. I got the gun from her, and she was under the control of a demon. Well, we hadn't learned anywhere near what we know today, but we'd been doing this every night for a while. And so I just said, who are you and what's your power over her? Because that had worked before. And the spirit said, I'm the power spirit for the Winnemucca Indian Nation. And I said, what power do you have over her? And this spirit said, you're such a fool. You don't know what's going on here at all, do you? And I said, well, no, I don't. I know that we almost all died, and it's your fault. I know that. And the spirit said, yeah, but you're an idiot. You don't even know who this woman is. He said, do you realize she's marked? And I said, I don't even know what that means. And the spirit, of course, was mocking me. And he said, of course you don't. You don't know anything about spiritual reality. She's marked by the blood of a virgin sacrifice. And that gives me the right to kill her at will if she's in my territory. Well, that was news to me. I had no idea what he was talking about. I had no idea that spirits could see marks on people that humans couldn't see. that distinguished their spiritual liabilities. I didn't know that. I know that now, but at the time I did not know that. And so I said, "What do you mean she's marked?" And this spirit was just mocking me. He said, "You fool! She's marked because of what she's done, and I have the authority to kill her." And so I said, "Well, I'm new at this. You obviously aren't. But if you are indeed the power broker for the Winnemucca Indian Nation, and you say you have the right to kill her, I guess that adds up to an epic fail, huh? Because I didn't even know you were waiting for me. And as you can tell, she's very much alive. So your plan to kill her obviously failed." Well, that made the spirit extremely angry and started ranting and raving. Of course, she's unconscious during this time. The spirit talking out of her and saying, "I'll kill you all." And I said, "Okay, just correct me if I'm wrong here, but didn't you just try to kill us all?" And it was an epic fail. There's no one in the van that is hurt. The most you did is scatter some of our luggage down the highway. We lost a few papers, but if you're that bad of a mamma jamma, this was an epic fail. And if you were indeed the chief of all the evil spirits on this nation, that would lead me to believe that all of your underlings just watch you get your butt handed to you, because you set up a sabotage and it failed. And here we are. And Ramona's alive. And at that, the spirit said, "That's not even her name." Well, I had suspected all along that, we were just getting the tip of the iceberg. I didn't believe for a minute that she had dabbled in witchcraft. Now this spirit's telling me, "You don't even know who she is. Her name's not Ramona, and she's defiled by the blood of a virgin sacrifice." So I did something I had never done before. I haven't done since, and I don't know particularly if it was the right thing to do or not. I just know that it worked at the time. And so I said, "Well, listen, you tried to kill us and you failed. You tried to kill her and it failed. And I don't think you can kill us, or I think we'd be dead on the highway already. So I think that because we carry the name of the Lord Jesus Christ and the Spirit of Christ, I think we have more power than you, which is why we can cast you out of her." "No, you can't." I said, "Well, I think we can." And I said, I'm not the guy that's going to roll over and play dead. So if you want to throw down, get it on, we can do that. But I said, we will stay here if we have to. We'll stay right by the side of the road for a week until we win this battle. But I said, what you need to ask yourself is if you want every demon in the Winnemucca Indian Nation to watch you get your butt kicked, because I would think you wouldn't want that to happen with everybody watching. And it ranted and raved, and "I can kill you," blah 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 blah. But I could tell that he was thinking through his options, and I said, "Well, so is this it? We're going to throw down here and see how long it takes to cast you out?" And he said, kind of leaned forward, and he said, "Well, if I leave, you promise to never bring her back to my reservation." And I was late already, and I was in a bind, and I said, "If you leave without hurting her, yeah, I won't bring her back onto your territory." And he said, "No, this is a deal. If you bring her back, I'll have the right to kill her because you gave me your word." I said, "I won't bring her back. There's more than one way to get to Northern California from here." So instantly the spirit was gone. And Ramona, she came back to her senses, and of course the van was a wreck. That stuff had blown all down the highway. My brother-in-law was out collecting stuff off the edge of the highway, and she said she was calling me dad time. She said, "Dad, are you mad?" I said, "Yeah, I am actually." And she wanted to know why, and I said, "You're going to find out why, but not until we get off this Indian reservation." So we drove to the other side of the Indian reservation as fast as we possibly could. And when we exited the Winnemucca Indian Nation, I pulled off the side of the highway and I said, "Ramona, you need to get out of the van." And she said, "Are you going to leave me on the highway?" And I said, "Well, I haven't decided yet, but I will tell you this. Um, you just endangered my life, and it's because you've been lying to us." And I said, "The Bible tells us the truth sets us free, which tells me that you are not going to get free if you keep lying to us." So I said, "This is what I'm willing to do. I'm willing to go to hell and back for you if you promise to tell me the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. But the day I find out that you've been lying again is the day that you move out of our house." And she said, she was crying. She said, "I don't want to move out of your house. I don't have anywhere to go." And I said, I get that. But this is the way this works. The truth sets you free, lies keep you in bondage. So I want to know why this spirit just told us that Ramona Jarnigan was not your name. She said, "Well, it's an assumed name." I said, "Okay, I want to know who you are. And I also want to know why that spirit said it had a right to kill you because you were defiled by the blood of a virgin sacrifice." And she just began to heave and weep. And she fell down on her knees right there on the side of the road and was just crying with her face in her hands. And she said, "It was my little sister. I didn't want to kill her.
Mm-hmm.
He made me do it. He made me do it. He put my hands over the blade and put his hands over my hands, and he made me."
Wow.
And it was very intense, and she was just weeping. And so I said, "Okay, okay, who is he?" "My father." And I said, "Okay, and your father is?" And she said, "You promise you won't abandon me?" And I said, "Ramona, or whatever your name is, I promise that we will fight hell, and we will go to hell and back for you if you will be honest. But please don't lie to us anymore." And she said, "All right." She said, my father was Anton. He's the Black Pope, the founder of the Church of Satan, the author of the Satanic Bible. I was born in the Satanic ritual on the Ohlone Indian Nation in Illinois, and the sex ritual between my father, Anton Lavey, and Ohlone Indian witch for the purpose of what they call a power convergence to bring all the power of Native American occultism together with the power of Crowleyite Luciferianism, and they call it a power convergence. So anyway, she said I was conceived in that ritual, and I was dedicated to Lucifer and groomed to be a bride of Satan. And she said I couldn't stand it anymore, and so she said I finally ran away from the coven, and that's why witches have been chasing me. So now, one other thing that I'll mention to you guys that to me was it was very significant. Um, we did all these outreaches into the prisons and juvenile hall, and we had done them for a long time, and I frankly, Cheryl and I both, that's what we love to do. But uh, one of our juvenile hall outreaches, I went into juvenile hall on Monday, as I did often, and instead of being able to go back into the cell blocks and interface with the population back there, there was a plexiglass cage that was set up in the lobby of the juvenile hall, and where you check in, it wasn't even behind the doors back there. It was right there in the lobby, and it had a 14-year-old girl in it, And when I walked in, I glanced at her. She was just staring down. And I said, "Really? You got a little girl locked in a cage?" They said, "Yep." And I said, "Why would you do that?" And this CEO smiled and said, "Well, would you like to interview her?" Well, at the time, I thought, how bad can it be? Yeah, I'll interview her. So anyway, he hollered to his superior, "Pastor wants to interview the girl in the cage." And everybody had a big belly laugh. That came out and opened the plexiglass door and poked me inside and locked it behind me. And she was sitting at a chair, little table between her and another chair. So I went up, pulled up the other chair, and I said, "Hello, sweetheart." And she just growled at me. She said, "I'm not your sweetheart." I said, "I'm sorry. It was just a term of endearment." And she said, "I don't need any terms of endearment." I said, "Well, again, I'm sorry, but I don't know your name." She said, "You don't need to know my name." And I said, "Okay, well, could I ask why you're in juvenile hall?" She said, "I tried to kill my mother." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry." She said, "Why are you sorry?" "I'm not." She said, I thought I beat her to death with a baseball bat, but we threw the body in the river, and I don't know what happened, but somehow she lived, and they traced it back to me. And now I'm facing a lot of years in juvenile detention for attempted murder." And I said, first of all, it was a little overwhelming. I've done a lot of that stuff since then, but back in the day, I was young, and I thought, wow, who would try to beat their mother to death with a baseball bat? So I was a little taken back, and I said, well, um, I said, "Why did you hate her?" She said, "I didn't hate her." And I said, "Well, you tried to beat her to death with a bat." She said, "Yeah, but I didn't hate her." And I said, "Well, why else would you do that?" She said, "It's simple. It's for her power." She had a lot of power. She was at the top of the coven because of her power. I was at the bottom because I was just getting started. But she said there's a thing called Judas ritual, and if I can betray somebody to death like Judas did Christ, I can actually get their spiritual powers.
Yeah.
So she said, my boyfriend and I, he also was part of the coven. We knew she was trying to get away from the coven because our demons told us she was unfaithful. And so we decided to do a Judas ritual and get her spiritual powers. And we thought we had pulled it off successfully, and then somehow or another she lived. So
Wow.
now we're both going to prison, and it didn't work out the way we'd hoped. So
Only but
anyway,
God.
yeah, I just thought, wow, what a twisted life for a little 14-year-old girl. So I uh, thought, this is not an extended conversation here. I got nothing else to say. So I said, well, I said, if you ever need anything, if I can help you, let me know. And she got down real low like this, and there was a camera that she was trying to hide from. The camera was behind me, so she got down in front of me to where the camera couldn't see what she was saying. And she whispered to me, she said, "I need blood." And when she said that, of course, again, I was raised on a ranch in Idaho, right? So, girl needs blood. She must be anemic. And so I said to her, I said, "Well, sweetheart, I'm not a doctor." She said, "I'm not your sweetheart." I said, "I'm sorry. I still don't know your name, but I'm not a doctor." And she said, "No, and I'm not anemic." And so I just thought, what in the world is going on? So I said, well, if you're not anemic, why would you need blood? And she just leaned right up into my face and said, "'Cause I'm addicted." I know now that, demons speak through people, and that creepy feeling that you get. Most often, you're not even talking to the person; you're talking to a spirit that's in the person. At the time,
Right.
I didn't know all that, right? And so I just thought, "Geez, Louise, little girl, you're creeping me out here." But anyway, she, she just got upset because I'm addicted, and
Wow.
and I said, "To drugs?" And she said, "Well, that too." And I said, "Okay, besides drugs, what are you addicted to?" She said, "Blood, you fool. I'm a vampire." Well,
Ew.
when she said that, I just thought, okay, now I know why you're locked in a cage and you can't be in the student population. And I said, just kind of musing to myself, I said, "Wow, where do you usually get blood?" And she leaned forward and tapped her jugular vein. And at that point, I was pounding on the plexiglass and saying, "I need out." And they yanked me out. They were laughing and they thought I was hysterical, but it really
Hmm.
unnerved me. And I said, "Hey, I don't know what you guys think you're doing, getting your jollies by locking a civilian in a cage with a vampire, but that's not cool." And they said, "Oh, we were watching you. We'd have jumped in there if she'd have gone for your neck." Well, the whole thing unnerved me because, frankly, I didn't even know there was such a thing as vampires. I thought it was a construct of Hollywood. And here I'm talking to a little girl that's in a cage because, in addition to being a Luciferian Satanist and trying to beat her mother to death with a bat, she was addicted to human blood. And so they were keeping the other juvenile hall residents safe from her because of that. So anyway, the reason I tell you that long story is because the bits and pieces of this story that make it really surreal. It's totally amazing. It happened to me. I've told the story 1,000 times, but it's still absolutely miraculous to me because the way God led us into this, we really didn't know what we were getting into. We really, for one, Cheryl was more anxious to do what her grandpa did, but I didn't have a grandpa like that. I'd never seen anybody cast out a demon. And I was plenty happy helping single moms and widows and teen runaways, and I never fancied myself as a Christian exorcist, and I wasn't wanting to go down that road. So a missionary that had befriended my father years ago, he called me out of the blue, and he brought me this book. Uh, and he told me, he said, "David, I was fasting and praying, and he said, I'm certainly not thinking about you. The Holy Spirit told me to buy a book, to write a message in it to you, and to bring it to you and give it to you as a gift. So I'll see you this weekend." Well, it's like, oh, all right. So here come this old bony prophet from Borneo, and he showed up, and I had him speak at the church that weekend. And after lunch, he gave me this book, and it's called "He Came to Set the Captives Free." You can see it there. It's written by Dr. Rebecca Brown. But again, I grew up on a ranch in Idaho. I'm denim and straw hat cowboy, right? So I
Hmm.
looked at that book and I said, "Well, all due respect, Jack, that looks kind of weird." And he put his hands on my shoulders and got up real close, looked me in the eye. He said, "Son, the world is much weirder than you have ever imagined." And you
Oh.
know, at the time, I thought, "You trying to creep me out or what, dude?" But anyway, I looked at that and I thought, I'm not a likely candidate to read that book. But what he wrote in it got my attention. It said, "Dave and Cheryl, to our dear friends in Christ who we dearly love, may this true story stir you to take your rightful place at the front line of spiritual warfare. Love,
Hmm.
Jack and Ann." And he had me read that, and I did. And I said, "Well, thanks, Jack." He said, "Thanks." I said, "Well, yeah, no, just trying to be polite here. You brought me a gift. Thank you." He said, "Well, you might hold off on the thanks until you figure out what that really implies." But he said, "You did read the part about the front lines of spiritual warfare, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And he said, "Well," he said, "I was a spiritual father for your dad. He's in heaven now, so I'm going to be a spiritual father for you, and you'll be hearing back from me." So anyway, this was just the backstory to what I'm telling you about confronting this lady on the highway after the experience in the Winnemucca Indian Nation. So, uh, so Jack, for every 2 years, he'd call and ask if I'd read the book. It happened 4 times. I hadn't read the book. I would open the book. It was bizarre. Uh, it's about the what are called the rituals of defilement that defile a human being so completely that they can't be redeemed, at least from the standpoint of Aleister Crowley, and that they qualify to be the bride of Satan and to bear the seed of the wicked one. So anyway, that's what this book is about. And I would try to read it, and I would say, you know what? I not only am I not going to read it, I would not recommend that any human being read that. It's about just defiling things that happen, and whether it's a true story or not. Why would you want to defile your mind with that kind of junk, right? So I never did read it. I'd read a part. 2 years later, he'd call. I'd read a little more and put it back. Finally, after 8 years, he said, "David, you're about to be face to face with the devil, and you're not ready for it. So I'll see you this weekend." And he came. He was in Chile at the time he called. He flew all the way to California, and he told me, "Son, you're about to be face to face with the devil. You need to read that book. You need to ask God to forgive you for being hard hearted and for not believing his prophets. See if God will have mercy on you." And of course, it was after that visit from Jack that this woman who this story is about came into our church. We led her to Christ and took her into our home. Now we're by the side of the highway. Again, she hasn't been honest. Things were, instead of getting better and better, they were escalating, getting more and more bizarre. And now the spirit confronted me and said, "You have no idea who she is. You're such a fool. And she's defiled by the blood of a virgin sacrifice." So, in the unpacking of this whole thing, remember, I said, "Listen, we will do our best to help you, but you have to help yourself. And the way you help yourself is you need to be honest with us. We don't care what you've gone through or what happened to you. We need you to be honest with us because the truth sets people free." So now
That's right.
she's unpacking this, and she says, "My father was Anton Lavey, and I was conceived in this ritual with the Lenni Indian Nation, and she said I went through a whole lifetime of satanic ritual abuse." And then she said, "And I went through some other really terrible things, but you wouldn't know anything about them." Well, now, suddenly, for the first time, it's making sense why the Holy Spirit told Jack Sisler to have me read that bizarre book. And so when she said, "I've been through some other rituals, but they're really terrible and you wouldn't know anything about them," I said, "Have you been through the rituals of defilement?" Well, she almost passed out. She said, "How do you know
Wow.
about those?"
Wow.
And I said, "Well, this prophet from Borneo said God told him to buy that book and to write in it a message about being in the front lines of spiritual warfare and
Hmm.
to bring it to me and tell me to read it." And and so that was amazing, right? I mean, that's amazing. A
Yeah.
guy from Borneo, for heaven's sakes, most people don't know where Borneo is. And so I'm just thinking, wow, God, this is a master plan that you've crafted here. So we're still by the highway. And I said, So is there anything else that you haven't told us? And she said, you guys ready for this? You got to make sure your hats are on there tight. She says, yeah, there you go. I said, is there anything else you're not telling us? She said, well, yeah. And I said, well, now's the time. I don't want to have any secrets. It's not going to work if there's secrets. So she said, well, she said, I wasn't really in a car wreck because her face was all bolted together when we first met her and looked like she'd been in a terrible car wreck. She said, I wasn't really in a car wreck. And I said, well, why would you lie about that? She said, well, it's embarrassing, but she said, my daughter tried to beat me to death with a bat. And she
Mm.
threw my body in the river, and angels of God came and rescued me. Uh, and you can imagine, I was just
Wow.
like, this is unbelievable. And I said, is your daughter a vampire by any chance? And she said, yes. How do you know that? I said, well, I got stuck in a plexiglass cage with her for a little bit in juvenile hall. And she told me
Wow.
she'd beat her mother to death with a bat and threw her in a river and that the woman lived. She said, oh, that's my daughter. She said her name. And she said, I've been praying for her. And yeah, she's got lots of problems. And uh,
Lots of
uh,
demons.
lots of demons. She was crying, and she said, it's all my fault because I'm the one that got her involved in
Yeah.
Luciferian Satanism. And, so she was crying about all that mess. But anyway, I thought to
Wow.
myself, only God can knit together a story like
Oh,
this. It
man,
is
holy moly.
completely,
This is a
completely,
movie.
yeah, it
This
should
is
be
a
a movie,
movie.
bro. It
It
should
is.
be.
And you haven't even got to the climax of it yet.
Yeah. Well, anyway, so there we are by the side of the highway, and and when she told me that, I said, okay, um, so what's your real name? The spirit said, I didn't even know your real name. She said, my real name is Ray Lavey. That was the name they gave me at the ritual of convergence that I was conceived at. And she said it's after a powerful spirit, the sun god Ray. But anyway, um, so so she said, but I don't want you to ever call me that because it's associated with all the evil in my life. And I
Right.
said, would you like us to keep calling you Ramona? She said, no. And I said, well,
Hmm.
what would you like us to call you? And she said, I'd like you to call me Deborah Joy Bryan, and I'd like you to pray about adopting me. And I said, I don't think we can adopt you. You're 2 days younger than my wife. She said, no, you can adopt anybody of any age. She said, I've
Hmm.
already checked on it. And I said, you've already checked on adoption? She said, yeah, I want you to adopt me. She said, I need a good family. I've never had one. And I want to go by Deborah because she was the warrior queen of the Old Testament. And I want to go by joy because that's the promise of God for those whose lives have been filled with sorrow.
Wow.
And she said, I
Wow.
want to go by Bryan because that's our family name and it means victorious one. And I
Wow.
just thought, wow, way to go, little lady. That's pretty amazing. All, in her brokenness and all the misery that she'd been through, she was still hoping that there was a happy story left for her in life.
Only
So
God gives that hope like that, too.
only God can
That's.
do that, Christopher. So we hugged her. We all cried, and we just made a commitment to her. We said, listen, uh, you've been honest with us, and we're honest with you. We will stand with you, hell or high water, and it was both. But we will not abandon you. We will not give up. She said, well, you don't know my father, but he will come after you. And I said, well, correct me if I'm wrong, but haven't demons been coming after us every night since we met you? She said, well, yeah. And I said, okay, so there you have it. I mean, how much worse can it get? She said, well, he will actually try to kill you in the physical plane. And I
Hmm.
said, well, honestly, my dad was a gunsmith. I grew up with guns. I'm not really too worried about somebody killing me on the natural plane. It's all these supernatural freak shows that are weird, But if somebody just is trying to hunt me down, they may have more than they bargained for on that deal. So anyway, she said, "Well, he's a powerful sorcerer, and he already knows this is happening because that's how demons work. They travel at the speed of thought. As soon as we start talking about something, my demons go to tell the Black Pope what's happening. So he already knows what's going on, and he knows that you know who he is, and he will come after you, which happened. So that was in June of 1997. And the months between June and the end of October were indeed colorful. So the Black Pope Anton, his coven came after us. They sacrificed dogs and cats and birds and even a llama on our church property. They'd pour out blood and do
They can't
sacrifice
touch you though, man.
with. Yep, isn't that beautiful?
They can't
And
touch you.
they would let loose live rattlesnakes in our yard and our church property, but no one was ever hurt. They did everything they knew to do,
The
and
blood of
just like you
Christ.
said, we were just we were just um, doing the who's the guy did that song? Can't touch this. What was that guy's name? We were
Oh,
doing
is
the
that MC
MC
Hammer or
Hammer.
something like that?
Yeah, MC Hammer. Yeah, but
That's
anyway,
awesome.
yeah. So, and I was pastoring the church. Of course, not just I, but Cheryl and I and our pastoral team. We pastored the church through that whole mess. My boys named me Senior Lopez during those days because during the day I was just a regular pastor, loving people, helping teen runaways, and helping with feeding the homeless, and all the things that Christians should be doing. But during the night, I'd set my alarm, get a few hours sleep, wake up at a quarter till 2, get my game face on, start praying in tongues, and at 2 o'clock, man, all hell would break loose, and we cast out demons every night. And our neighbors even came over one day and said, "Hey, I don't mean this to be awkward, but are you doing seances every night over here?" I said, "No, we're doing the opposite of seances. Seances where you get demons. We're doing exorcism. That's where you get rid of demons." And blew their minds. But
Hmm.
I've written one book. I'm writing three others right now because the amount of things that went on during those days. It wasn't like once in a while something would happen. It was every night. And the Church of Satan galvanized the occult sciences around the world, really. And what I mean by that is there are a lot of different kinds of covens, druids and witches, and of course Satanists. There's just about as many varieties in the dark kingdom as there are, denominations in Christendom. But in any event, we'd get curse cards from different covens in Germany and Austria and different places, and so it was on, and we prayed and still do all the time. Oh God, cover us in the day of war. That was the prayer of David. Cover me, oh Lord, in the day of war. And you know what happened is we saw the incredible power of God, not to some superstar. I'd be the first to admit I'm just a guy, trying to do my best to help people and get a good report in this life, as a good and faithful servant. I'm not particularly spiritual as most people would gauge that. A lot of people have amazing gifts of discernment. I'm mainly just slog along and keep punching. That's what I got going for me. I keep my chin down and just keep punching. And so, I wish I was more gifted, more talented, more holy, more all of the above. But the point is, we believed in the promises of God, and I did have an uh, an unswerving faith in the goodness of God to protect His kids. And so many times I thought, well, if I'm wrong about this, this will be the day that I die. But climbing in a haunted house when Ray Ray was in there with a butcher knife. I've done all kinds of things like that, and just thought, well, God, either you help me, or they're going to have a memorial service next week and say, well, at least he was a brave guy. Might have lacked common sense a time or two, but at least he did what he thought he should do. So I've been in lots of those experiences. God has always been amazingly faithful, and we've helped. Of course, the story ends well, which I'll tell in a moment how Anton died. But to me, really, these stories are about the faithfulness of God to love those made in His image and likeness, and to be able and willing to redeem them from any kind of evil. Remember,
Any
the
kind.
rituals of defilement
Any
were
kind.
planned. They were planned by evil people to put people beyond the reach of redemption.
Right.
Nothing puts people beyond the reach of redemption. And so Deborah Joy, we call her DJ now. She's happily married.
Wow.
She's living in another state and doesn't really want
Oh,
bothered by people who are wanting to, ask her what the rituals of defilement are like. But she's happily married to a friend of mine, graduated from one of our rehabs. His name's Billy, and they're doing good. They call all the time, and we love them very much. They love us. They're serving God. Her daughter, that tried to murder her as a young lady, she went through deliverance and came to Christ, and
Oh, wow.
6 kids, and is serving God. Um,
wow.
Wow.
DJ also had an older son and an older daughter. Both of them have come to Christ. And so it's a really beautiful story of mercy and redemption.
Wow.
And it's not about sensationalism, it's about the goodness of God that is absolutely more powerful
Right.
than anything hell can ever cook up.
Yep.
Whatever the devices of the wicked one, we can always, through the power of the
Trumpet.
gospel, we can unring hell's bells. And so that's, of course, what makes it such a bummer to be a slave in the dark kingdom. Everything
Yeah,
they
that's
try to do, we're impervious to. I mean, not that we haven't had our challenges. Spiritual warfare is just that. We fight, they fight back, but we always win. We're more than conquerors through Christ who loves us, and we have joy in doing it. Now, when we got back from that incident by the side of the road, and we said we will adopt you, and if it's possible, which it was, and we did, and so she's officially our daughter, Deborah Joy Bryan, and we love her very much.
Oh.
And when we got back, we introduced to the church that this is our daughter. This is the story. We heard an amazing story at that time, which we had no idea of. One of the couples of the church came forward and said Benny Hinn prophesied over her in Sacramento at Memorial Coliseum. And I said, oh, no, I think you've got the wrong person. I don't think she was ever in a meeting like that. She said, oh, yeah. This lady said, oh, yes, she was. She was sitting right in front of us. And we heard the whole prophecy because he said, this little lady wearing this that's out there, thousands of people. He said, you can hide from me, but you can't hide from God. God told me you've had a terrible life, and you don't know what the love of a father is, but you're going to know the love of your Heavenly Father. And because your Heavenly Father loves you, He's prepared pastor in Yuba City, California. And you'll go there, and she was in Sacramento at the time. said, you'll go to Yuba City, and God will bring you into a pastor's family. They'll love you and call you their own, and your story will go throughout the world and be an inspiration to many. Which, how amazing, right? And
Wow.
yeah, and it was a coliseum full of people. DJ is like 5'1". She's a little tiny person. She was hiding out there, and she told us later. She said, "Yeah, I went to the coliseum because every time I'd go to a church, I'd go demonic. They'd call mental health on me, and or call the police on me. And I determined that churches couldn't help me, but I thought maybe I'd sneak into the back of that coliseum and maybe somebody could help me." But anyway, that's another piece of the amazing story. And so after we found out who she was and we made a covenant to help her, we came back, and all these incidents, they just began to escalate. So Anton would sometimes call us on the phone. Most often, excuse me, most often he would astral project, and he would enter Deborah Joy just like a demon does. And for those listening, that may seem strange to you, but on the astral plane, that means in the spirit realm, if a human leaves their body, which probably has happened to thousands of people that are listening right now, but you're connected to the body with a silver cord. But in that astral state, your spirit man can actually go out. It's invisible to everybody else, but it can go out and behave much like a disembodied spirit, because in the technical sense of the world, that's who you are. When you leave your body, you become a disembodied spirit. The only difference between you and other demon spirits is you still have a right of entrance back into your physical body by virtue of the silver cord. If the silver cord is cut, that's equivalent to death, and we'll talk about that later in a minute. But so Anton, he pioneered the remote viewing program for the Department of Defense and the U.S. Pentagon. So the astral viewing was going out into the astral plane as a disembodied spirit, still attached to your body through the silver cord. You can travel at the speed of thought. You can go anywhere. You're invisible, and so you're untouchable. It doesn't matter if they wouldn't be able to see you, but even if they shot bullets or a flamethrower in your direction, it wouldn't touch you because you're in a different realm. And so the astral spying program, or the remote viewing program, as the Pentagon called it, was pioneered by Luciferian Satanists, Anton Lavey, and then later Michael Aquino. And so he was a world expert at astral exploits. And so he used to leave his body, and then he had a right of access that was what is known as an organic fetish. And we probably don't have time to talk much about that, but it's something that was in Deborah Joy's right hand. It was actually a tendon that once belonged to Aleister Crowley and then to Anton Lavey, and then was inserted into her. And it's living tissue, and it grows there, and it is a permanent portal.
Thanks for watching this segment from our live show. We're live every night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, except for the Sabbath. See you tomorrow.